Our writers group has for a long time had a rather complicated relationship with the state, symbolized by the writing space we're given. At one of our recent meetings, we were given a room across from the hall from where we usually are. And like the other one, this has the problems of a lot of hard spaces, sound reflective surfaces like the floor and the walls. It's also right next to the security guard stations. There's a lot of conversation and occasional phone calls describing the bizarre actions of some of the people who need to be evicted from the library. People call back and forth to each other, and the washroom's right around the corner, so we're usually partway through trying to write something when we hear this from the washrooms, which don't have any doors on them. They just have paths that people fall through, and their spaces leading into them are fairly wide. But this time we also had the additional strange sounds of faint rumblings coming through the ground from the C train, and then another one that we couldn't even identify. We heard this sound like sort of a softer version of a jackhammer. And after we got started writing, I took a couple of minutes to go out and listen in the washroom to see if it really was the toilet or something else. The security guard then got interested in this and asked me what he thought it was, and it didn't match the sound of the toilet. So he called down to the office, and two more library people came down. I don't know why, but the ones other than the security guard always travel in pairs. So we ended up with three library staff, in a way, participating in our writing session, because they all set about trying to solve the mystery of where this strange sound was coming from. And eventually the security guard phoned up to the upstairs coffee shop, which is fairly close by, only on a higher floor, and said, I know this is going to sound strange, but could you guys flush the toilet for me up there? So we actually doubled the size of our group participation by getting the library staff involved. And this then fed into the topics for the writing session, which largely became about uncomfortable living spaces and circumstances. One of them had the Statue of Liberty, which had been apparently depicted elsewhere as trying to seek liberty by leaving the United States. And then we had another with the video on YouTube, 2 hours in a tiny house, about the struggles of trying to adjust to life in a tiny house. And it was a little bit like where we were, of course, because of all the inability to shut out outside noises. And then that posed the problem of how do you fit the Statue of Liberty into a tiny house? How do you reconcile your desire for liberty and living off the grid, partly expressed by our writers group's meeting to not be part of the library system, even while using its space, and the difficulty of fitting the Statue of Liberty into a tiny house? So we had several themes that developed out of the situation of trying to solve the mystery of the source of the sound, which the library people eventually thought might be because of a seasonal changeover in the way the heating and cooling system worked. But we ended up with a diversity of topics addressing that, and eventually one of the stories became about a sort of sound emporium where you'd pay and sit around and try to sample various sounds. So all the bizarreness fed into what we ended up writing.